Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Club at the End of the World. In this episode, we are focusing on the topic of refreezing the Arctic and related topics. And I'm very happy to be joined by Adam in Olympia, Washington, Dan in Chicago, Jason in Long Beach, California, Mike in Calgary, Canada, and Miles in Calgary, Canada, and I am on Whidbey Island, Washington. So I'm going to go on mute so folks can say good morning, and then we'll jump into the topic in earnest. Going on mute.
Yeah, Dan from Chicago, good to be here, ready to go.
Hey everybody, it's Adam. Yeah, good to be here. Ready to go too. Thanks.
Yeah, Miles in Calgary, ready to go. I've got quite a bit of background noise, so I might not be talking that much at the moment.
Hi, this is Mike from Calgary. I'll probably be muted for much of it as well, but thanks, Miles, for extending the invitation to have me here.
All right. Awesome. Great stuff, you guys. And by the way, for those who are watching, anyone can join this Hangout or any of the Social Club at the End of the World Hangouts. They're open to the public. I've posted the link both on my Facebook page and my Google Plus page for how to join this Hangout. You just click on the link and you'll be literally, boom, right here in the room with us. So the topic for today is refreezing the Arctic and related topics. And in previous sessions, when we've talked about refreezing the Arctic, we've talked about some of the ways, kind of engineering-wise, that we might accomplish that, including but not limited to putting up massive, in terms of surface area, we're talking millions of square kilometers, massive reflective sheeting. In order to reflect away the sunlight back into space. I'm thinking thin film reflective sheeting is just like the quickest and most efficient way of deploying all that. There's tremendous cooling that happens. And so for me, it's essentially obvious that if we are going to refreeze the Arctic, we're going to have to do it by a massive geoengineering, however localized in the Arctic region, but geoengineering nonetheless in terms of reflecting sunlight back into space. It's, quite simple, really, from that standpoint. Now, how do you deploy that thin film reflective material to reflect the sunlight back into space? Well, the fundamental engineering problem there is how do you support the massive thin film, massive sheets, like maybe a given sheet might be 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers to give you 100 square kilometers of reflectivity. How do you support that? Well, there's a lot of possibilities. One is to have like a whole network of buoys, for example, or other floating devices to literally prop up this thin film that could be supported above the surface of the water. Another would be to float it right on the surface. Another would be to have a system of blimps to support it. Another would be to have a system of towers to support these massive thin film sheets at different points. Another would be to have a combination of such different systems: buoys, blimps, towers. And of course, in addition to reflecting away the sunlight, some of that thin film material could have photovoltaics to turn some of that sunlight into electricity to be used for myriad purposes. But anyway, that's one thing, is just reflect away the sunlight. Another way, another vehicle mechanism for cooling the Arctic and preventing more ice from melting would be to erect some sort of ocean barriers or ocean curtains, which go from the surface of the ocean to the ocean floor, or whatever strata are most effective for deflecting away, preventing warm ocean water from chipping away at the Arctic sea ice. So we've talked about possible engineering solutions, but in the past, on previous episodes of this conversation, this series of conversations, we've noted the reality that until and unless you get humanity on board, whether that comes in the form of governments getting on board, whether that comes in the form of the population as a whole getting on board, and then forcing the hand of government to act and deploy some of these systems, the key linchpin appears to be getting humanity to wake up that A, this is a huge problem, and B, there's something that we can do about it, beyond, you know, Al Gore telling us to change our light bulbs and drive electric cars. And I'm saying that with some cynicism, because I obviously don't believe that kind of the traditional, you know, over the past 10, 15 years, ways of addressing climate change, shifting our power sources to renewables, that's not enough at this point, obviously. So we need greater interventions. So anyway, with that, I just kind of wanted to open it up and see what folks think. And you know, in the past, we've talked about how do we get people to wake up, and that may be what we end up talking about today. But I just wanted to give a bit of a context and framework and let folks jump in, particularly folks who haven't spoken that much on the issue. So I'm going on mute, and welcome you all to.
Jamin, I just wanted to, you know, I also experienced the solar eclipse here in Calgary. It was a partial eclipse, of course, but it was really amazing how the temperature dropped dramatically, even though only partial sun was blocked. The other thought I just wanted to share was, you know, maybe, I don't know that the reflective surfaces and thin films that you're talking about necessarily has to be up in the Arctic. It could be right in our urban centers. It could be anywhere, I'm thinking, to reflect energy. Not necessarily have to take it up to the Arctic. And then, you know, just to think about how possible it is, if we think about how much of the surface we've already coated with thin films, like carpeting, you know, have you ever added up all the carpet and the tile that's been laid? It seems perfectly plausible. You can convert those carpet manufacturing plants into thin film reflective plants. Going on mute.
Yeah, that's a good point, Miles. In fact, I mean, the urgency. Well, part of my logic of doing it up in the Arctic is, number one, you know, it's the Arctic ice is this critical linchpin between life and death for humanity, so, you know, that's why I talk about a kind of an intensive focus on reflecting away the sunlight that's hitting the Arctic, particularly the dark blue Arctic Ocean water. One second. You know, there's all this sunlight, particularly in the summer months, like right now, that's just beating down and getting absorbed by the dark blue Arctic Ocean water. That's sunlight I'd love to be reflecting back into space. But we can certainly extend it from the Arctic down south more generally. Because at a planetary level, we need to change the heat balance, right? We're just absorbing way too much heat. The planet's getting hotter. And, you know, soon we'll run out of habitat for humanity. So hence the urgency. And in terms of our, you know, our industrial capacity, I think that, I haven't done the macroeconomic analysis, but the thin film installed capacity for cranking out thin film materials for all kinds of applications has got to be sufficient if we were to redirect it towards this geoshading. Anyway, just wanted to respond with those comments. So going on mute.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. In order to wake people up, that is a huge problem. when we're looking at a situation where as the Arctic melts down, perhaps a blue ocean event this summer, methane gas is going to be released into the atmosphere in greater and greater quantities. Also, the land areas around the Arctic are also in meltdown. And as that additional quantity of greenhouse gas enters into the atmosphere, it accelerates the average global temperature rise. It's a huge, obvious problem. And I haven't heard anybody, you mentioned Al Gore, and I go back to his recent movie where, he shows ice melting, cites that as a indicator of the problem, but basically glossed over, maybe didn't even mention at all, the problem with methane gas coming into the atmosphere. So for Al Gore, who's a significant proponent of let's do something about climate change, to ignore that, to me, it's really significant. It's not something which should be overlooked. And if we had Al Gore in this conversation today, we could ask him, why did you choose to de-emphasize or not mention? Why did you choose to self-censor that particular fact, which is the most salient piece of information really connected with the meltdown of the Arctic? And so, that tells you, I don't know how you would define that problem of Al Gore. Maybe Al Gore doesn't believe it's a problem. Well, that's a problem right there. Al Gore needs to be educated very quickly about, an area that he's supposedly an expert. And moreover, we need data. The thing that I find so disorienting and so disheartening is to hear people talk about, the increase in average global temperature, but to do it with different baselines, to claim it's this much and somebody else says it's more or less, and to have that kind of confusion, it basically goes against the necessary socio-political energy, and which is necessary to get something done. And one other kind of thought, there's certain things in the entire culture which are taboo to some extent. It's like on our social club at the end of the world, we frequently hear people talking about the economy, the neoliberal economy that we've been living under for decades. And one of the big features of that is that it relies on the externalization of all costs. Make profits, externalize the costs and the damages that come with the profit-making activities. And this is a huge problem with climate change. It's pretty clear that the costs of all these profits being made, whether it's in the United States, China, Europe, wherever, simply gets externalized to other areas of the globe, and eventually it's going to be externalized to everyone, including those who are making the short-term profits. And there definitely needs to be a way of waking people up to the fact that time is possibly very, very short. And there's very little disagreement among prominent climatologists about all of these, dystopian nightmares that are awaiting. The only, one person says it's going to happen within 10 years or 5 years. Somebody else says a couple of decades, and, it can be put off even further. But there's no escaping what's coming. unless something is done, and that's what we're trying to talk about. My final words on this are, I think that people have to be hit in the face with the cost to themselves and their, precious families and their loved ones. I just don't see people really being concerned unless they have to really consider it. And it's pretty obvious that it doesn't take long for the United States propaganda machine to turn out all sorts of fear of terrorists and, nuclear bombs going off in cities, which relative to the damage that will come from exponential climate change is minor, actually. So there has to be a way to have a discussion that touches people's hardwired fear for themselves and their loved ones. I'm going to mute out.
I'll jump in. Again, it's Miles. One of the things I've mentioned in the past, and I've been thinking about it today, Calgary is bidding for the 2026 Winter Olympics. And I was thinking, that is just so insane when we think about the precautionary principle that Guy McPherson teaches us about. And I've been thinking of that. And I sometimes wonder, with respect to trying to get people's attention, possibly Guy McPherson is saying 2026 we're all going to be dead because he wants to get our attention, right? Because there's this business of, we'll just dilly-dally around. Somebody will come up with some solution, but in the meantime, I'm just going to go out and mow my lawn. Maybe he's saying these things. I'm hoping, that he's really, using shock and awe to get people's attention. But if he is actually sincere, it's a curious coincidence to me that 2026 is the same year that Calgary thinks it's going to put on the Winter Olympics. And I was thinking, we've got to tell the city of Calgary, this is crazy. Stop thinking about the Olympics. But then I thought, maybe it's a both and situation, and in fact, I wouldn't even waste my time trying to convince people not to have the Winter Olympics, but would say, maybe have the Winter Olympics and also at the same time get the world's attention while you're promoting the Olympics, saying, hello, we got global warming here happening on an extent that hasn't been ever seen before for a long time, and in fact. I could be wrong, but it might have even been a Harvard report just recently said that at 410 parts per million carbon dioxide in the air, that is not going to be going down, and that it's the highest in 800,000 years. So, as you said, Daniel, making sure we have accurate facts is critical, and I can't right now quote where that number comes from, but if it's true, it's serious business. And in fact, Mike is also from Calgary, and to tell you the honest truth, and Mike could vouch for this, but to me, it is very unusual that I'm sitting here in a t-shirt and shorts, and that they're saying that the temperature is going to go up to 30 degrees Celsius for the second day in a row in May. Typically in May, I should be, might even be thinking about, whether I should still wear my long underwear or should I put it away. So the people here think, oh, what a beautiful day. Go out and enjoy the beautiful day. Well, you got to wonder why we're having this beautiful day. And, these sorts of things are just some ideas with respect to how we might get people's attention. Going on mute.
Yeah, if I could just say, Miles, Guy McPherson, in my mind, absolutely believes what it is he's preaching. He has no doubt. And he bases it on a lot of interesting data evidence, which is available on his website. But hardly anybody knows about Guy McPherson. Hardly anybody knows who he is, what an effective speaker he is, and presenter. But I do feel that he absolutely believes that in his mind, based on the evidence and the data that he has collected and looked at, 2026 is kind of going to be the final curtain comes down. And it's based on the exponential processes which are in play. And I think that's important. Again, if you look at the graph of the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere, so we have 410 parts per million at this point in time. This is an exponential function recently. And the temperature, which appears based on lots of, again, evidence, will track the quantity of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. It hasn't had time to catch up, but it will. And as we continue to pump more and more in an exponential fashion, and again, I go back at this point, the external, everybody is raised in our culture at this point in time to accept the externalization of costs while you pursue profits and status, et cetera, et cetera. This is a huge problem, and it's something which is kind of in the mind brain of huge masses of people, and it needs to be confronted as being part of the problem. But we're heading towards a dystopian outcome, and perhaps a total extinction, a massive die-off. First over someplace not in the United States or perhaps Canada, but somewhere in the world, in the Mideast, in Africa, in 8 parts of Asia, and then it will continue in other parts of the world. So to deny the fact, this is just stuff which is there. But we have a lot of problems getting information. And like I said, I think last week I was making this point, and I want to underline it again. As Guy McPherson likes to say, the scientists in, let's say, the higher levels of, the military, the intelligence community, and in academia, the ones who are, in a sense, sworn to secrecy by the government, if they know this is coming and there's nothing that really can be done to prevent it, that's something which, even if that were the case, it ought to be discussed in public forums so people could have, a decent period of time to figure out how they want to react to that kind of a horrific outcome. But right now, we just seem to have everything is just going on. It's normalcy. It's business as usual. And again, in order to wake everybody up, they're going to have to. There has to be a way to get them to look at some very, very harsh realities on the ground. And if that's not able to be accomplished, then the herd's going to be shoved off the cliff, and whatever happens, in that sense happens. I'm going to mute out.
Well, I'll come on board, I guess. I think that, first of all, I think we need to freeze the Arctic. I think it's, as opposed to freezing lands in other places, because we need to build up that bank of Arctic ice, which has been at the North Pole for 2.6 million years. When I was a kid, the Arctic, the ice pack floating on the ice was like, I don't know, it was really thick. It was like 50 meters thick or something like that. And, it's melted all that thickness in my lifetime. But the people that really count today are the ones that are, they're in their 20s and stuff. That they still have a whole lifetime ahead of them, and they don't want to die. So, but we do need to get the word out. That's for sure. And I'll go back on mute now. Thanks.
So it's interesting to hear you, Dan, talk about, externalities, external costs. And I understand, I always thought, if you actually took the price of a gallon of gas, it really should be, I remember I saw something that said it should be like $27 or $30 a barrel, because for all the, environmental damage done, if we were actually to include the externalities in that, these are all the negative benefits, and to deal with the negative benefits of consuming a gallon of gas, you need to pay this much money. So say that's, $25 on top of a gallon of gas. So each gallon of gas is then going to cost $25. These are ideas that could totally be used if we could actually get somewhere with government or the people, for instance. We would maybe say to them, hey, gas is now going to cost $25 a gallon because 20 of those dollars are going to refreeze the Arctic and build machinery and factories or places to draw down carbon. It's really kind of crazy, because the crazy people in our society, I almost would feel like, well, I can't, this would be like a breakdown for them. They'd be like, well, this is ridiculous. We're not going to pay for this crap. The other way would maybe be targeting oil companies and saying, hey, look, you are the ones who caused this whole mess. And look, that never works, right? Because they are always trying to target them and say that you've caused this whole mess. You should be the ones to pay for it. And the only way to get them to pay for it that I would see would be going through government again, which we never can get anywhere. You can't get an honest politician elected. So I hear the externalities thing, and I feel like there's a good segment in The Corporation, which you can watch for free online, that goes into that about corporate externalities. Sort of like the same idea as, the American taxpayers paid for the Iraq war trillions of dollars, right? But really, that Iraq war wasn't for us. It didn't benefit me or you, Dan, or you, Jamin. It benefited the oil companies. It benefited Halliburton, made billions of dollars. It benefited Bechtel. It benefited, so these are companies that they are brilliant in the way that they've gone around and gotten the American taxpayer to pay for their fucking war so that they can make billions of dollars rebuilding a country and stealing their oil. And so I guess sometimes we go through these whole segments about talking about how to refreeze the Arctic. I just feel like some of us have got to, go and do it. We wouldn't even work on a small scale, but maybe the small scale is that media is that kind of wake up fucking moment to get people to do it. Like if we could get a Netflix show, like, oh, these crazy fucking people are going to refreeze the Arctic, and at least you would maybe get a chance to speak about some things. I don't know, maybe I'm just spewing crap out of my mind, but yeah. I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah, so, that idea of doing something to wake people up, I think it's a good idea. And again, that can take different forms. But my bias is based on human nature. Unless people are afraid for their own well-being, their own lives, or that of their loved ones, they're not able to switch their view of the world and to be, strong in terms of insisting something needs to be done. I don't want to have to get to a point where I have to figure out how to put my own children down in a humane way, or maybe it won't be a humane way. I don't want to think about that as the response of within normalcy. What are you talking about? Why would you talk about anything so horrific? That's appropriate for a science fiction movie or a horror show. Why would you do that? I have to. Yeah,
that's a great, by the way. The sign could read, "How are you going to put your child down? Face abrupt climate change now."
Yeah, and I think something along those lines. It is necessary, because people are going to have to. It would be like if you can imagine. I don't know, sometime in the Middle Ages, you have a Mongolian or Turkic tribal force heading towards places in Europe, and if if the people living in some of these areas were told, hey, this is coming, they would do everything under their power to try to erect defenses, or maybe to leave. But you have to feel that your life is at close to being terminated, and also that of your loved ones. It is a horrific kind of place to have to go to, but in this situation, I don't know how else you're going to get people to simply say, hey, if there's anything that can be done, let's go ahead and do it. Whatever it takes to try to refreeze the Arctic, draw down greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere, let's get about that business now. Let's not pretend that we have 100 years to worry about it, and then it won't be my problem.
Well, I'd like to respond. First of all, I'd like to apologize for a couple of weeks ago. I said I wouldn't follow Jamin, and Jamin's been kind of my de facto captain in all this, and he's really inspired me, and so I've been working on my own approach to these problems, and I'm going to start my own internet talk show here pretty soon, similar to this one. So I think as far as refreezing the Arctic, I think we need to get the elite, the powers that be, whoever they are, to join in. And that's going to be the focus of one of the focuses of my show. But how do we get the elite to join in? Because they're the ones that control the media. I mean, if anybody has the power to sway the public, they have the power, and they also have hidden technology. And I know the last time I was on, I mentioned HAARP, which is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project. Well, there is a lot of information about the HAARP technology, and it has. The technology has progressed. It started out with Ronald Reagan telling everybody that we were going to develop the Star Wars technology to shut down, to be able to shoot missiles down so you'd create like a grid over the United States to protect us. Well, then if you look up the definitions of HAARP and stuff on the internet, you'll find out that it's actually a weather modification tool, and when its first design was developed by Nikola Tesla, and so it's very powerful. And they have, from my understanding, they have dismantled the first HAARP that they made in But since then, they've gotten more of them now, and they're in better technology. And so, I mean, I think that they could use this HAARP system to refreeze the Arctic. And I also, I wonder why, if we have this technology that, that we can refreeze the Arctic, why aren't we using it? I mean, this is certainly more important than the Iraqi war. And, by 2001, when 9/11 happened, and after that, we went into the Iraq, and by 2008, we had already spent $3 trillion. And the estimates for putting 100 million seawater pumps up in the Arctic is like $3.2 million, something like that. That's what the estimate was. So, why isn't the government just hiring a contractor to go do that if it's physically possible? I mean, that just doesn't make much sense to me unless they have some other plan. I'll mute out.
Guys, I'll just jump in here, and some great ideas being shared. One of the things I think is everybody has perhaps a perspective on how to address getting attention and getting people involved in their local area and by their own particular experience and perspective. And one of my perspective is that we need to actually move into forums where everybody from all demographics are participating, and that goes from children to seniors and elders. And for that reason, I just want to say that we cannot have any more F-bombs or swearing or profanity, because that doesn't fit with the concept that I'm working towards, which is an all-inclusive demographic. So I just wanted to say that. And I think the engineering solutions can certainly get us there, but eventually, however, they have to be chosen very carefully, and that's where I think we need this broad demographic to now be involved in these decision-making processes. Because honestly, if you look back at the past 10,000 years, we've been here for 20,000 years, but essentially it seems, as you pointed out, Adam, that something went a little askew when we started pursuing agriculture and livestock in particular. And over time, the so-called Western civilization lost its sacredness for these other sentient beings, all of our relations on this planet. And I think it has something to do with the male brain and the fact that we have moved away from the involvement of that feminine. We're all logos all the time, and we've repressed eros, which is a very fundamental balance needed for harmony. So I'll just go on mute.
I'm going to mute out. I guess I'll again kind of jump in. So the issue of male temperament, socialization, etc. We are constantly asking young men to give up their lives in these military actions, wars, etc. And young men are willing to do that in a lot of circumstances. But what we have going on at this point in time, it just seems to me, is we have a sociopathic or psychopathic kind of socialization, not just of men, of women also. And I think you can see that pretty clearly when you look at when people are climbing up the ladder to powerful positions. you see, in a sense, more and more of a psychopathic kind of a orientation. That means your focus is on the accrual of money and power. And of course, money translates into power if you have enough of it. And you do not have any concern, again, for the damage that you do while you are pursuing your own self-interest. And you can see this in the United States. We have a very, very corrupt system. You know, it's if you're not interested in making profits or helping somebody else make their profits, you're not of much use, and your thoughts aren't very valuable. And so it's just permeates everything, and it's something where, again, you know, Donald Trump as president, he is constantly showing to the population how the psychopathic or sociopathic mind works. And yet it just seems not to be part of the discussion. People like talking about it in terms of, you know, some mass murderer, that must be a psychopath, etc. But the inability to take responsibility for your actions and having utter contempt. So again, to repeat something that I brought up a few times, Donald Trump views the average human being struggling to get, you know, to go forward with a good degree of contempt. You know, it's and this is the psychopathic way of, you know, it's predator or prey. And Donald Trump and others see themselves as, you know, very successful predators. And as far as the prey goes, you know, they deserve to be victims in a sense. That's the way of the world, the harsh jungle that they, you know, kind of envision. So in order to, you know, go forward, and I know we're going to be talking about collective intelligence shortly, but I do think that there has to be a way of, you know, kind of abstracting out at a higher level the various things that are holding humanity back from behaving in a much more altruistic, cooperative fashion, and to have that. Hopefully, that can happen very soon. I'm going to go ahead and mute out.
If I could jump in quickly, can you guys hear me? It's Jamie from Cleveland.
Yes, Jamie, go for it, bro. Welcome.
Awesome. I've missed a few of these, but every time I get on, I'm so refreshed at the serious intellect that's happening here. It's really impressive. I just this morning read an article in a magazine to touch on a previous point. I want to make a point, but it was only about 7,000 years ago, and Daniel might know more about this with his background. It was really only about 7,000 years ago that mankind changed the deities from a female carved stone and a mother centric to a male. That's really only happened within 10,000 years. So I forget who made the point about the male and the ego, and all of these things that we clearly see are a significant evolution in the wrong direction. So that segues to my refreezing the Arctic point. I am developing a thought process, and I just want to put it out to the community because this is where these things are go. Like, and for those of you that haven't met me or whatever, I'm my background is government employee, law enforcement, state, federal, and local law enforcement my whole career. So I've been inside the belly of the beast, inside the grinder, if you will. Not a policymaker. I was a tactician. I was a doer, the worker bee. In any case, I sense in my own self, I'm 53 years old. I certainly am willing to die for this cause. What I sense is I don't, in my heart, believe that the audience that is intrinsically American is the right audience. Now, there are many people, and the ones here all are the right audience. And this is a small hive of very intellectually advanced worker bees, and we're trying to grow the hive. And I'm feeling like to get the world leaders and the doers feel the need that there's a movement afoot. I feel like, and it's just a concept, I want people to comment on it, ruminate on it, not comment on it, whatever. I feel like we need to reach out to the Canadian government and the experts there that do understand climate change. And the United Kingdom, the BBC is constantly talking about climate change and their scientists because they're always ahead of the curve and they get it. And the Netherlands and Sweden and the areas where the thinking people exist, Vienna, if we can, I mean, something as simple as we all draft a letter and sign it and send it to 1,000 different climate scientists or 1,000 along with climate organizations and governments and say, hey, this is the group of people. We don't have the answer, but we've clearly identified the problem and we're hamstrung. So what I mean, reaching out to somebody in their minivan in America, in Cleveland, buying Happy Meals for their kids, I don't have 53 more years to convince that person that their iPad is damaging the world. I feel like collectively through this forum, that these conversations have led me to believe, and I haven't been in all of them, but I've monitored them, I've listened to them. And I think that we all feel the same way here, that we're bumping into this America and this Trumpism stuff, and regardless of politics, it's not even a political issue. I think we're at a cusp here with the world. The world is going in two directions right now: machoistic warmongering and earth-centric repair. And the machoistic earth monitoring and the people that control the media are going to win that because they have control of the TVs, at least in the United States. But the problem solvers exist all over the world. And I feel like if we were waiting for the leadership of my country, the United States of America, to get on top of this, it will never happen. And the elites will figure out a way to use SpaceX to launch themselves out of here, or as we talked about previously, to cull the herd and start over. And I think it's just a concept. I'm throwing it out there. You don't have to talk about it now. But I think this energy that we're getting off this group, we need to harness it and start to try to contact in a collective fashion the people on this planet that clearly see the problem and clearly have access to the type of people that can clearly assist with the solutions. Because just like there's the Trumps out there, there's the George Soroses out there who have resources and are willing to fight this. But we got to pull them out of the political punching match and get them into a real solution. So that's a very rough, primitive statement to get my concept out there. But there it's out there.
James, are you going to be around for the next hour? Because I'd like to respond to that, but I see we're at the top of the hour.
Yeah, we need to.
Yes.
We need to wrap up, and then we'll launch the next one, whose focus is a new story for humanity, which is obviously a very broad topic. So that's very appropriate for that. I hope you all can join on the next one. I'll be sending out the Hangout link in about 3 minutes. So that'll be on A New Story for Humanity. So this episode has been on refreezing the Arctic. I really appreciate everyone's input. We'll just continue the conversation on the next one. So please look out for the next Hangout link, and I'll see you all in a few minutes, okay? Great to see you all. All right, see you in a few. Thanks.